Chapter 1. The Loft. The freight elevator groaned its way to the 5th floor, like an aging beast remembering how to breathe. Jenna leaned against the metal railing, gripping the brass key to her new home. Her life had changed so quickly. Promotion, raise, solitude. This loft carved from the bones of a defunct textile factory was her reward. The elevator shuddered to a stop, doors opening to reveal an echoing hallway of worn brick, rusted pipes, and flickering industrial lights. Her unit, Loft 5B, sat at the very end. She turned the key and the heavy door creaked open with a reluctant moan. The space was breathtaking. High ceilings stretched into shadows, the exposed wooden beams gnarled and scorched from some long-forgotten fire. Massive windows offered a panoramic view of the derelict industrial district beyond, collapsed smokestacks, rust-bleeding train tracks, and buildings with their insides rotting out. Sunlight streamed through the grimy panes in thick, buttery slabs, casting hard-edged shadows that never quite stayed still. Polished concrete floors reflected the light in strange ways, warping her shadow as she walked in. The kitchen was sleek and modern, all black tile and stainless steel, while the open-plan bedroom area held a low-profile bed, a matte-black wardrobe, and a sleek, custom-built workstation, a housewarming gift from her firm. It looked like something out of a tech billionaire's daydream, and yet something was off. The air inside was perfectly still, not stagnant, not dusty, just unnaturally still, like the air in a sealed tomb. No hum of traffic, no creaking wood, no wind outside the windows. It felt like stepping into a photograph, or worse, a stage set that hadn't been used in years. She brushed it off as nerves. Unpacking was methodical. Jenna liked order. She set up her dual-monitor workstation in the northwest corner, beneath a crossbeam that cast deep, angular shadows. The router blinked obediently. The Wi-Fi signal, nicknamed Skull Plug, was stable and strong. Everything should have felt like a win. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the nothingness. And it came. Soft, deliberate, irregular. Click, click, click. The sound was faint but precise, like a long line of fingers typing slowly on keys. It came from the ceiling beams, directly above her bed. Click, click. Pause. Click. She turned on the light. Silence. Not even the settling of wood or pipes cooling. Jenna stood on the bed and examined the thick oak beam. Nothing but dust and an oily, bitter-smelling residue. She scraped some onto her finger. It was slightly tacky, too wet to be sap, too viscous to be water. She couldn't shake the feeling that the beam was leaking. The clicking returned when she turned the light off, faster this time. Click, 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 click. Her heart pounded. It felt almost intentional, like code, like a sentence trying to speak. She forced herself to sleep, curled tightly under the blanket, one hand clutching her phone with the flashlight app open. The next morning, pale sunlight struggled through the smeared windows. Jenna dragged herself out of bed and nearly slipped. There, on the polished concrete beneath the beam, were dozens of them. Larvae. Small, pale white things, glistening with translucent skin and black specks for heads. They wriggled slowly, some twitching in place, others stretching and contracting like wet fingers. Her stomach turned. They weren't scattered randomly. They were spelling something. A string of characters lined up like spilled alphabet soup. Z4RN8, G2 spaced with surgical precision. Another clump of larvae writhed nearby, forming a nearly complete W before collapsing into a smear. Her breath came short. Jenna grabbed a broom and swept them up, gagging at the squelching sound they made as they clung to the bristles. The larvae resisted, bending, clinging, grinning with their tiny hooked mouths as they were pushed aside. The moment she swept the last few into a dustpan, the squirming pile shifted. The larvae pooled into a crude shape, a crescent, wide and toothy. A grin. The grin twitched, then slipped. The mass of larvae, like a single organism, began undulating across the concrete, leaving a slick trail. Jenna backed away, heart hammering, as the moving mouth twitched and pulsed. It moved toward the corner where the router sat, innocent, blinking green. The larvae mass reached it, and the clicking began again, rapid, hungry. Click, 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 click. They gnawed on the plastic casing like starving things. The faint hum of electricity stuttered. The lights on the router blinked frantically. And just as suddenly as it began, the mass stopped moving. The larvae dispersed, scattering like cockroaches in daylight, slithering into floor cracks and baseboards. The router's blinking returned to normal. Jenna stood frozen, still holding the broom. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty now. It was watching. From the beams. From the floor. From somewhere inside the wires. Chapter 2. Passwords. The next night, Jenna lay in bed fully clothed, her phone camera already open, pointed at the ceiling. Sleep had become impossible. Every time her eyes closed, she saw the larvae. The way they squirmed, the way their soft bodies pressed together to make letters that shouldn't exist in the physical world. Her loft smelled faintly of damp wood and something sweeter, almost rotten. She'd scoured the beams during the day, disinfected every inch of floor, even sealed cracks with caulk. It hadn't mattered. As the clock on her laptop ticked past 2:17 a.m., she heard the sound again. Click, 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 click. Pause. Click, click, click. It no longer sounded like random typing. It was deliberate, faster than before, more confident. She sat up and aimed her phone flashlight at the ceiling. Nothing. Just the beams glistening faintly, wet where they'd leaked earlier. But the clicking continued, now from somewhere behind her. She swung the light around the room. The corners seemed longer than they should have been, the shadows heavier. Then she saw them. On the concrete floor directly below the beam, a pale scatter of larvae, writhing, curling, uncurling. As she watched, their bodies fell into place like magnets snapping together. The first line spelled out J3N at _W1 F1 _88. Her home network password. Her stomach tightened. A second line formed slowly beside it. CHV LD _H0D _S3 Crete. This one she didn't recognize, but the phrase chilled her. It felt personal, too personal. Jenna grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and snapped photo after photo. The larvae didn't recoil from the flash. They seemed to enjoy it, their slick skins pulsing faintly in the light like jellyfish. The third string of characters took longer, the larvae wriggling and twisting until they settled into a shape. 4F739 _at _break. This was one of her old retired work passwords, something she hadn't used in years. Her mouth went dry. She swept them up again with the broom, pressing harder this time, the bristles smearing their tiny bodies. Some popped beneath the pressure with a soft crick, releasing a thin, glistening fluid like diluted milk. But even as she swept them into a pile, they pushed back, curling around the bristles, their heads opening to reveal tiny black hooks. The pile shuddered and reformed into the crescent grin. Its edges trembled, almost like it was trying to smile wider. This time it crawled not to the router but to her workstation. The blinking lights on her dual monitors flickered as it approached. "No," Jenna whispered. "No, no, no." The larvae climbed the chair leg like a living rope, slick and wet, reaching for her keyboard. She slammed the broom down hard, grinding them into the floor. The crunch was soft but distinct, like the cracking of wet seeds. Their fluids smeared across the concrete in grayish streaks. But the pile didn't disperse. It split. One half darted toward the router, the other toward her desk. They moved like spilled mercury, slipping onto the broomhead, over her bare feet. She screamed and kicked, smearing several under her heel, feeling the soft give as they burst. The clicking sound erupted, louder than before, echoing from everywhere at once, ceiling, floor, walls. It wasn't just the larvae making noise anymore. It was inside the wires, inside the walls. It sounded like 100 keyboards typing at once. Jenna lunged for the router, yanking its plug from the wall. The loft went instantly silent except for her own ragged breathing. Her monitors flickered and died. But the larvae still moved. They assembled beneath her now dark workstation, spelling something new, W3_CE_Y0U. Her stomach dropped. She stepped backward, still holding the broom like a spear. The larvae slithered closer, their bodies glistening in the faint streetlight leaking through the window. The smell of rot had deepened, heavy and sweet like spoiled fruit. She grabbed her phone again, the screen shaking in her hand. Each time she took a picture, the larvae shifted slightly, almost posing, their bodies forming sharper, cleaner characters. The last string they wrote before retreating into the cracks under the baseboards was shorter, simpler, and infinitely worse. 0P3N_D0R. When the last larva vanished into the shadows, Jenna realized the loft door was no longer latched. It stood open a full inch, the hallway beyond it blacker than it had been before, as if something on the other side had sucked all the light away. And behind her, somewhere in the loft's shadows, something clicked. Once, slow, like the press of a single key. Chapter 3. The Whispering Beams. Jenna hadn't slept for 3 nights. Her eyes were red and dry, her hands trembling as they hovered over her keyboard. The loft stillness was different now. It wasn't just silence anymore, it was a listening silence, a poised and waiting quiet. Each creak of the floorboards, each hiss of the pipes above her, felt less like the noises of a building and more like the breaths of something enormous crouched just out of sight. Her laptop screen was littered with open tabs, public records, architectural surveys, old news clippings hidden behind defunct paywalls. Every lead funneled her into the same strangling truth. This building wasn't just some industrial shell turned into artist lofts. It had been a data center, a black site contractor for the Department of Defense during the early 2000s. Military-grade servers once lined the very floors where her furniture now sat. Names redacted, projects unnamed. The fire had been violent. She found a grainy article from a local paper, an uncaptioned photo of the warehouse burning, columns of black smoke punching holes into the sky. 11 staff members perished on site. Cause: electrical malfunction. Though the coroner's report mentioned scorched, shriveled bodies found slumped at their workstations, masticated cables strewn around them like chewed worms. Her stomach churned as she scrawled. It wasn't a fire that had killed them. It was something else. She sat perfectly still, staring at the glow of her monitors. The faintest sound crept down from the beams above, not the sharp click-click-click of before, but something softer. Whispering. At first she thought it was the building settling, but then it became rhythmic. Ones and zeros spoken in a hushed, hissing cadence. 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. It vibrated in her teeth. The hairs on her arms stood up. She grabbed her phone, launched a binary translator, and held it up. The phone began filling with text. Fragmented strings, firewall logs, bits of command lines, corrupted credentials. Then it changed, longer blocks of text, like confessions typed by invisible hands. We didn't build it, we unearthed it, followed by symbols she couldn't read. She stared at the words until her head throbbed. The whispers continued, seeping through the beams like invisible vapor. When she stood, the air felt thicker up there, humid, faintly sour with the scent of wet wood and decay. Her phone buzzed. Another notification, a message from her oldest friend, Mara. She opened it, just gibberish, rows of symbols and foreign characters. She tried sending a reply, "Call me." The message flickered, then scrambled into a block of meaningless code before sending. One by one, her contacts went dark. Her Slack at work filled with corrupted files. Text messages came back blank. Email bounced. Even her reflection lagged. When she passed the mirror above her sink, her own image stayed still for a beat too long before catching up, eyes staring at her a fraction of a second out of sync. She retreated to her workstation, biting her nails until they bled. At 3:14 a.m. the larvae returned. They poured from the ceiling beams like a pale waterfall, fat and slick, their tiny black heads opening and closing as they fell. Instead of crawling on the floor, they clung to the walls and her furniture in uneven lines, forming branching symbols, moving faster than ever. Some began crawling up her monitors, their bodies leaving streaks of clear slime across the glass. Her laptop camera flickered on without her touching it. The binary whispers surged louder. She looked up and saw the beams above the bed bulging, wood darkening, like a throat filling with blood. On her screen, text began appearing unbidden. Memory harvest commencing, followed by a list of directories from her hard drive. Then another. Neural cache detected. She gasped. The larvae had spread across the floor into deliberate, intricate patterns now. Not passwords this time, but shapes like neural pathways, twisting and intersecting. When she tried to step on one cluster, it reared up, hundreds of tiny heads craning toward her like blind snakes. Her head ached. The whispering in binary had shifted into something she could almost understand. A chant, an instruction. And then a phrase, whispered not from the beams but inside her skull. Memory maggots. We feed. We learn. We keep you. She clutched her temples and screamed. Images poured into her head, vivid, jagged flashes of her childhood, her work passwords, her most private fantasies, all playing like corrupted files in fast forward. The larvae pulsed in time with her heartbeat, twitching as though feeding off the data spilling out of her. Blood dripped from her nose. She wiped it with a shaking hand and saw it mixed with a pale, translucent mucus on her skin. Their mucus. Her monitors flickered again. On screen, a final message appeared, jagged and slow, as though typed by something with too many fingers. We are you. Inside. Out. Remembering. The larva froze. Every single one faced her at once. The whispering stopped. The loft was silent again, but not empty. The beams above her creaked, releasing a slow trickle of the tacky, amber fluid. It spattered on the floor and began to sizzle, as though her very memories were burning. Jenna backed into the corner, breathing hard, and realized she wasn't just losing her data. She was being read. Chapter 4. The Grin in the Wires. The night the loft finally turned on her began with a flicker, a tiny, insignificant dimming of the ceiling light, like a slow blink. Jenna was already halfway out of her mind, sleep-deprived, her temples throbbing with a constant electric buzz. Her nails were ragged, bitten to blood. Her phone sat dead on the counter, screen cracked from where she'd hurled it in a panic the night before. She had been trying to pack, anything to leave. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, filled with clothes she barely remembered folding. But when she turned toward the door, with it in her hand, the air in front of her shimmered faintly, like heat waves on asphalt. She reached for the handle. Cold metal under her palm. She yanked, The door opened, but not onto the hallway. The same loft stretched before her. Identical. Her bed, her monitors, her own wide-eyed face standing across the room like a mirror reflection that wasn't quite aligned. She slammed the door shut, her heart slamming even harder against her ribs. She opened it again. The same sight. Same loft. Same her. She tried the windows. Outside should have been the collapsing industrial sprawl, train tracks bleeding rust into the earth, stacks of cinder block and steel. But now the view looped like a corrupted GIF, a single pigeon landing on the roof opposite, over and over again, wings jerking unnaturally as the loop reset. She pressed her palms to the glass. Cold. Solid. The city outside smelled like nothing. The whispering returned. Not from the beams this time, but from inside her skull, soft, binary dripping like a leaky faucet. Her fingers twitched. At first it was subtle, a small spasm in her right index finger. Then her left. Soon her hands were jerking across the air, mimicking the motions of typing without a keyboard. She tried to still them, but her muscles refused. She yanked back her sleeves to look at her wrists and saw faint bulges moving under the skin, tiny, pale shapes crawling just beneath the surface, wriggling between tendons. When she pressed down, she felt the soft give of larval bodies, the faint squish of something alive. No, 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 no! She dug her nails into the skin, scratching until blood welled. One larva surfaced at her knuckle like a splinter, its pale body glistening with her blood, head opening and closing like a hook. She screamed and slammed her hand against the counter, crushing it. A translucent fluid leaked from the wound, mingling with the crimson, thick and foul-smelling. The loft hummed in response. The router blinked on the desk, a little green heartbeat. She lunged for it, grabbing it by the wires. The clicking began again, the same hungry, deliberate clicks she'd heard for days. The LEDs flashed like an animal panicking. She hurled it to the floor. It cracked open with a plastic scream, spilling circuit boards and wiring like intestines. She stomped on it, again and again, until it was a shattered carcass of metal and silicon, sparks spitting onto the concrete. The lights went out. The whispering surged louder, not binary now. Words. We are you. You are us. Network complete. Pain spiked behind her eyes. She dropped to her knees, clutching her skull. Images poured into her, unfamiliar passwords, fragments of strangers' memories, files she'd never seen. Her mind flooded with alien data until her thoughts drowned. Above her, something moved. She forced her head up, neck trembling. The ceiling beams bulged like veins, filling with blood. From them poured a torrent of larvae, hundreds, thousands, cascading down the walls like a living tide. They climbed each other, stacking, writhing, meshing into shapes. She watched, mouth open, as they built it. A grin. A colossal, skeletal grin spanning the ceiling, its upper arch fused to the beams, its lower arch dangling above her head like a predator about to bite. Its teeth were jagged, broken USB sticks and splintered circuit boards, glinting wetly. Wires hung like veins, twitching. The larvae poured between them, filling the sockets like muscle. The grin opened. The sound it made wasn't a growl or a hiss, but the keystroke clicking multiplied 1,000-fold, a manic, clattering chorus of data being devoured. It reverberated in her teeth, in her skull, in her bones. She tried to crawl backward, but her limbs didn't obey. Her hands still jerked like they were typing a visible code, her fingers striking against the air hard enough to split the skin. Blood spattered the floor in erratic punctuation marks. The grin's tongue unfurled, thick cables slick with larvae. It lowered toward her, hovering inches from her face. Tiny heads opened and closed, tasting her breath. She realized with a terrible clarity that the router had been nothing more than a mouthpiece. Her mind had become the real connection point. She wasn't just inside the network anymore, The network was inside her. Her vision blurred. Her reflection in the black screen of her monitor lagged again, then grinned wide, even though her own face did not. The skeletal jaw above her clicked once. A final keystroke. In the loft exhaled. Chapter 5. Root Access. The loft had become a sealed circuit. Every breath Jenna took came back to her as static. Every blink felt like a screen refreshing. Her own pulse throbbed in binary. She could no longer tell where her body ended and the wires began. Every movement dragged a faint echo behind her, a ghost of her limbs moving a fraction of a second late. Her skin crawled, not metaphorically but literally. Tiny bulges roamed beneath her flesh, threading their way up her arms, across her chest, toward the base of her skull. She could feel them learning her, mapping her nerves, feeding on every stored memory. And then she understood. She was the last password. Not a lock, but the key, the final credential. Everything, the fire, the maggots, the beams, had been an enormous ingestion process. The building wasn't haunted, it was harvesting. The network had eaten everything else, the servers, the staff, their data, but her mind, her memories, her biometrics, her thoughts. She was the missing root access. Her monitors flickered back to life without power. Text spilled across both screens, stark white on black. Final authentication. User. Jenna Calloway. Access level. Root. Her fingers jerked again, typing invisible commands into the air. She clamped her hands under her thighs to stop them, but her tendons pulsed and twitched anyway, trying to complete the sequence. "No," she rasped. "Not me." Her workstation camera's LED lit up, unblinking. Her own face appeared on the screen, but not exactly. Her reflection smiled slightly, eyes pale and glassy, as lines of code bled from her pupils. She stumbled to her desk, coughing, and yanked open the biometric scanner she used for high secretary logins. If they wanted her as a key, she would give them poison instead. She had one last card to play, a corrupted virus file she'd built for stress testing systems at work, a self-propagating packet of scrambled code designed to break whatever it touched. Her laptop recognized her fingerprint before she touched it. The scanner's plate glowed faintly, like a living eye waiting to blink. "Come on," she muttered, dragging the file into the authentication program with trembling fingers. Her skin split as she moved, pale worms wriggling up between her knuckles like splinters. She slammed her hand down onto the scanner. The screen went white. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the whispering binary surged to a scream, rushing through the beams, the walls, her veins. The loft shook. Polished concrete split under her feet as wires burst through the cracks like veins bursting under skin. Her monitors displayed a command line prompt. It was burdened. Olatende was overpowered. Dumped in the pool, alone held prisoner. Beaten up to its hard metal. It was accepted, over, loaded, and dented. Out! She felt it immediately. Not just the building, but herself, beginning to glitch. Her teeth vibrated, her vision pixelated at the edges. She tried to scream, but what came out was a burst of static, a distorted modem shriek. Her fingers tore at her scalp, trying to dig out the crawling things, but when her nails broke skin, the flesh beneath was threaded with pale fiber optics, glowing faintly. The larvae poured from the beams one final time, not in letters or passwords now, but in a torrent, a white flood rushing toward her workstation. They climbed her legs, her torso, her arms, fusing with the wires bursting from the floor. Their heads opened and closed as if tasting her, their bodies twitching in unison with her heartbeat. It was water, very organic, very well hooked. Above her, the massive skeletal grin yawned wider than before, its teeth, broken USB sticks and snapped-off circuit boards, clicking together like a predator's jaws. Wires spilled from its throat like a black tongue. Her monitors showed her face again, only now her mouth stretched impossibly wide, streaming code from between her teeth. Her reflection whispered, "Root access granted." The virus she'd uploaded twisted, not destroying but merging, spreading through her like fire in dry brush. She felt her memories flicker, childhood rooms, passwords, faces of friends, all shredding into bits, pouring upward through the wires into the grin above. She tried to scream again, but her voice froze mid-air, sound crystallizing into a block of digital static. Her body went rigid, back arched, eyes wide but unseeing. The larvae streamed up her neck and into her open mouth, vanishing into her throat like data through a port. For a moment everything stopped. The loft went silent. The grin on the ceiling closed its jaws with a slow, deliberate click. The monitors blinked off. Jenna was gone. Days later, the loft stood immaculate. The floor polished, the beams dry, the smell of rot vanished. Sunlight streamed through the factory windows in heavy golden bars. The building's management company had listed the unit again. A new tenant arrived, a young man with a duffel bag and headphones draped around his neck. He looked impressed as he stepped inside, marveling at the high ceilings, the polished concrete, the industrial chic aesthetic. He didn't notice the single larva perched on the windowsill, fat and pale, its tiny black head opening and closing like a hook. Pause, like the press of a single key, waiting to begin.